Good morning. Generally, for most of you, you know that I do the announcements when Pastor Sam is here, and then if I'm preaching, we'll switch. The message that I want to share with you this morning comes from Paul's letter to the Philippians, Philippians chapter 1, and it's just one verse. But if you have your Pew Bibles, with the Pew Bibles is page 873. On the Pew Bibles, page 873, it's one verse, verse 27. On page 873, Philippians chapter 1, verse 27, Paul, hopefully you recognize and you know that this is a letter that Paul was writing when he was in jail. And we talk about the fact that he's in jail, and then a large theme of Philippians is joy. How do we have joy? And then the question was, how can you have joy when you're in jail? But Paul found the way. But today, the message that I want to share with you in Philippians 1:27, Paul says to the Philippians, he says, whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. So I just want to read it again and then just kind of, hopefully we can think about, short verse, whatever happens. So whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. And then with this short verse, I titled the message this morning as Worthy of the Gospel. Worthy of the Gospel. Because Paul says, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. And if we think about these words, worthy of the gospel of Christ, the first word that's related is worth, right? Worth. Worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then worth. Hopefully we understand the word worth. Worth, a word related to worth would be value. What is the value? What is the value, right? And as most of you know, I'm not really a sports kind of guy, but I think a message a couple months ago I shared about the Philadelphia Phillies. Philadelphia Phillies acquired a player. His name is Bryce Harper. And do you know how much he's worth? Do you know how much he's worth? He has a contract for 13 years, and he's making $330 million. So 13 years. So he's young enough that they have a contract for him to play for 13 years. And then they're paying him $330 million. So what does that calculate to? It calculates to close to little less than $30 million a year, right? So this man is playing baseball every day, okay? He's out on, if I'm correct, actually this is how much detail that I know. He's out in the field somewhere. I don't know, center field, left field, right field, whichever field I was at. He's out there. And, I was reading an article recently that says Bryce Harper is not that great of a player anyway. Because if you compare him to some of the other stars these days, he's really not top A. But he's still worth $330 million, close to $30 million a year. So that's his worth, the value that a baseball team is willing to put on him and say, he's worth close to $30 million because we're going to get our money back if we have him in our team. And supposedly, if I remember correctly, when the announcement was made that Bryce Harper is coming to Philadelphia, do you know what happened? Supposedly, I don't know whether you've been to the baseball fields, but there's seats. The closer you get, the more expensive they are. If you're all the way up in the top back there, you can pay $15, $20, but the people are about this big, right? They're about this big. And they're you see these little running around, with the ball, and you're like, oh, somebody hit a ball, okay? So if you're way out in the field, maybe the ball will come to you if they hit a home run. But supposedly when he was signed, they said that the box office went crazy because they sold out on all the second season tickets, within less than a day. So the Philadelphia Phillies said, if we have that guy in our team, we're going to sell so many tickets and so many hot dogs, and you know how much the hot dogs are in the stadiums, right? I'm like, $10 for a hot dog? I'm like, yo. Now, that's Bryce Harper. So the value of that guy is about close to $30 million a year. Now, most recently, in the NBA championship, right? Some of you are sports, okay? I'm not really into it, but I'm just, for the sake of our message this morning and about value and worth. So, I'm watching it here and there. To be honest with you, when I saw the end of the NBA Finals, okay, I saw the NBA Finals, people in Philadelphia, they were going crazy because this guy hit, threw the, he threw up, okay, okay, if you look at my form, as they would say, you know how well I play basketball, okay? So if you go like this, he threw the ball, and within the last, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, the ball supposedly quadrupled. It said, cling, 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 cling. The ball went in, and then okay, I have to be very careful. The Sixers lost, okay? And then that team went on to play Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry. I don't know whether you know him. But they played. And then, unfortunately, some of the better players, they got injuries. KD, okay, and then he's not even going to be playing next year, but he's still going to be making $146 million. Can you imagine that? But this young man, okay, he played for Toronto Raptors. And because of him, they won. And everybody was like, which team is he going to go to? Which team is he going to go to? Okay, and I'm reading okay, he's going to LA Lakers, where LeBron James, the greatest of all times, they call it the GOAT, greatest of all times. And so LeBron James, and then some other guy, Anthony something, I don't know his name, okay? So the two of them are there, and they're like, oh, Kawhi, come to the Lakers and we'll have top 3 and then we'll win again next year. But then Kawhi supposedly made a little weird move. Well, not everybody was surprised because he went to a team called the LA Clippers. I asked my son-in-law, I said, hey, John, who are the LA Clippers? They're in the same area because LA Lakers, LA Clippers, same area. And my son-in-law tells me, oh, Dad, they play in the same stadium, so they just kind of rotate when they play. But this young man, I forget how old he is, but he's like early 20s. So he has a 4-year contract because they say that in basketball, baseball, you can have a 13-year contract because they know that you can play for so many years. Because you think about it, baseball, how much, okay, I played baseball when I was a little younger. Okay, when you're out on the left, okay, generally right field, whichever field that you're out there, when you're out there, you sit there and you're just like, when's the ball going to come out to me? Generally, it doesn't come out to you. It just stays in there. You run around in there, and then generally, like a home run, if it's a home run, it goes out. But if it's not a home run, then you're like, oh, okay, the ball is coming. Okay, so I played outfield, and I'm like, when's the ball coming? When's the ball coming? Generally, you don't play it a lot. But see, basketball is a very heavy, intensive game. And this past NBA championship, 2 of the guys of the Golden State Warriors, 2 of the guys got injured, and they couldn't play anymore. And so people were like, that's why they lost, whichever way. But this young man, his name is Kawhi Leonard. And he had a contract. So he signed a contract for 4 years worth, okay, do you know the number? 4 years, $142 million. 4 years, $142 million. So that kind of averages out. If I do my little numbers of, 142 divided by 4, 3, 12, oh yeah. He's making $33 million a year. $33 million a year. So then if I reduce that to 12 months, he's making $3 million a year. That is the value that the world places on their athletes. Close to $30 million for Bryce Harper, $33 million for Kawhi Leonard. He's worth $30 million a month. See, that's how the world looks at their stars. And we're willing to give them what they're worth. They are worth this much. So the question that I have, and the title of our message this morning is Worthy of the Gospel. What is the worth? What is worthy? What is worth? So a question and a challenge that I have for you goes something like this. And it's a question that I ask myself too. What am I worth? What am I worth? What am I worth? We should all ask ourselves. Think about it. What am I worth? What am I really worth? As you know, I can't play, I played baseball when I was younger. I'm not a Bryce Harper, of course, definitely not. Okay, my basketball, I played in high school with my friends, and my friends, you know how like when you're in high school, and this is one of the things that we talk about in education. Don't do it this way. They'll have two captains, right? They'll have two captains, and then they'll be like, okay, you pick your man. I'm a captain, you're a captain. You pick your man. And then he picks a guy, I pick a guy, he picks a guy, I pick a guy. Let's say this is basketball, right? And I was always the last one to be picked. You know what that means, right? You always got to pick the best guys first in your team. Okay, I pick him because he's good with, rebounding and whatever. And I pick him. And then all the ones, what we call, all the scrubs that are left out at the end, that was me. Okay? Because I could barely play basketball. So in sports, my worth would be pretty much this, all right? It was kind of negative. What am I, though? What am I worth as a human being? See, the world has its standards. The world has its values. The world puts its values on certain things, and then just within the sports, they're worth millions and millions. But when I look at myself, when we look at ourselves, the more important question is, what am I worth? What is my value as a human being? If we talk a little bit about, let's say, American history, sometimes, I hated teaching American history. I like teaching world history more. But then in part of American history, we always kind of go back into this thing about slavery. What is a slave worth? Do you know how much a slave was worth back in the 1700s? So they valued a slave based upon how many years that he can work, how healthy he was, and things of that nature. One of my favorite movies that I used to share with my high school students is the movie Roots. And then I'm always like, Kunta Kinte, And, there's this young boy in Africa, and then he becomes a slave, he comes to America, and then they put a value on that person, that slave, how healthy he is, how long he can work. So they put a value on a human being back then also. When we look at ourselves in the mirror, when there's no one else looking at us, and we're just kind of like by ourselves, what do we really think? And to ourselves thinking, what am I really worth? What am I really worth? Now, if we are very accurate, and if we're very biblical about worth, and if we have experienced truly a Christian life, there is a part in our Christian life where we recognize and when we understand that we are worth nothing. Job, if you remember, Job had riches, right? Okay. Simple summary of Job. Job was one of the richest men in his town. And Satan came to God and said, the only reason that he loves you is because, you've given him all these things. And then so God says, okay, you can take everything away except, allow him to live. So, Job had like thousands of camels. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And then in one day, he lost them all. And then even his body was at a point where his own friends couldn't recognize him because he had boils all over his body, and he was scraping himself because he needed to scratch himself. And then Job says, God, why am I going through this suffering? Why am I going through this suffering? And then he questions. And his friends, his 3 friends, his 3 friends keep on telling him, Job, you must have done something wrong because you are a sinner. God only, punishes sinners. And at the end, Job asks back and forth. And at the end, what God answered to Job's question in Job chapter 38 through 41, you know what? God says, okay, Job, let me answer your question. But before I answer your question, answer some of my questions. And then from chapters 38 through 41, God says, were you there when I laid the foundations of the earth? When I made all the planets, all the stars, all the animals? In Psalm 19:1 it says this, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech, night after night they reveal knowledge. God created the universe, as we say. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Let there be light, and there was light. The universe in which you and I live in, all the mysteries of the universe, God created by just His words. And then, you know how the story goes. Then He creates man, Adam and Eve. And then what did they do? God gave them one simple commandment. Don't eat that fruit, because the day that you eat that fruit, you're going to die. See, and that's why everyone sitting in this room, sooner or later, we're all going to die. You and I know, okay, what is my worth? What is my value? Sometimes, unfortunately, when we compare ourselves with other people, see, this is the sinful things that we do, right? In order to kind of, maybe to a certain degree, to alleviate our own insecurities, right? We kind of compare ourselves to other people and say, I'm taller than they are, I'm healthier than they are, I'm stronger than they are, I'm smarter than they are, and all these things. And then we look in our mirror and we say, yeah, I'm not too bad, right? One of the running joke goes in my family, it goes something like this. My wife always says to me, she says, you always look in the mirror and you think you're cute, though, don't you? And I say to her, I said, yeah, why not? And, it was very interesting and funny because last Lord's Day, I was up in Little Neck, right? So I visited my friend's church. I went over to his church. And, service was over. We were sitting down in the fellowship hall. And then he's the same age as I am. So he was born in 1963, right? He was born in 1963. And I'm sitting right next to him. And then he introduces me and he says, hi, this is my friend. And then everybody in the table, there were about 20 people in front. And they're kind of smiling and laughing. They're like, how is that? And then they're surprised. Is that possible? Because their senior pastor, he looks like he's like 40s, early 40s. He's black hair, full of hair. And then, he says, this is my friend. And then everybody's like smiling and laughing like you are, right? And then he says, oh, I don't want to say this, but if she's the same age, so one of us is not going to be happy. And to be honest with you, to me, I don't care. Because the weird and the funny thing is, I'm saying to myself, in my heart of heart, as my wife says, you think you're cute, don't you? See, in the heart of my heart, and this is one of the things that I tell parents. When your children are young, tell them you love them, that you would be willing to die for them. Because, see, when I was young, in my neighborhood, all the Korean people, I guess it's just a Korean thing or whatever, they would always say, oh, my name is Kwang Ho, right? In Korean it's Kwang Ho. They would always look at me and say, 우리 광호는 너무나 착하고 잘생기고 이뻤어요. See, that has lasted me for 50 years. So even 50 years, people are like, my wife says sometimes, look at yourself in the mirror. So I look in the mirror, yeah, no hair, shiny, right? People are like, you're shiny, like Koreans were like, look at the shine that's coming out of your hair, man. Like even my high school kids, they'll be like, Mr. Lee, can you turn that off? It's too shiny. It's too shiny in here. Turn that off, right? Okay? But see, when our children are young, if they know that we love them with an undying love. See, to be honest, I'm a worthless human being. But the people around me said, you are of value. See, when we look in Scripture, when we look at the Christian life, see, amazing grace. We all know the hymn, right? Amazing grace. And the words continue. What a wretch that I was. How useless and worthless I was. But God loved me. See, the Christian faith and the Christian life is that when we were worthless, when we had no value for whatsoever, that God was willing to send His Son, Jesus Christ. See, that is the gospel. That is the gospel that when Paul is saying, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. See, we ourselves, humanly speaking, like I said, I don't see any of us in this room out going to make millions and millions or worth millions and millions. I'm sorry. I mean, maybe there's young ones here that will, they'll grow up and they'll make millions, which is good and which is fine. But the most important thing that we need to recognize and understand is that our children, our grandchildren, and as you know, I have 2 grandchildren here. What is their worth? What is their value to me? See, you think about it, to me, I know I shouldn't, but like our second child, some people looked at her and says, oh, she's she or he. They can't, and they're like, she, he, sometimes they'll ask, because she looks very cute. Okay, personally, I look at some of the other granddaughters and young girls, and it's so girly. But to me, my granddaughters, here's the other question that I have. What are you worth? And then the other question is, who would you be willing to die for? And this is a question that I ask many times, right? Who are you worth someone dying for you? Because I know, without a hesitation, unfortunately, as I was preparing the message, I was thinking to myself, I said, if my granddaughters needed a heart, unfortunately, I can't give my heart. Why? Because mine is too big. Mine is too big. But if it was small enough, would I give it to them if they needed it? Yeah, why not? Right? But you and I know that we are human beings, that once we give our heart, our human, fleshy heart to someone else, that's the end of our life. But see, Christ, and this is the importance and the significance of the fact that Jesus Christ is human and also God at the same time. This is the truth that we talk about in the scriptures and the biblical teachings of what we call the incarnation and the humanity and the divinity of Jesus Christ. See, I could die for one of my granddaughters. I could die for one of my children. I could die for my wife, which I'm willing to, without hesitation, right? And there are people that I'm going to bet that hopefully that the people sitting in front of me, that you know that you will be willing to give up your life and you will be willing to give up your heart for generally the people that are sitting next to you, right? For someone in your family. Do you know the joke? It's not a joke, but like when I was teaching high school, I would always ask the kids, I would be like, okay, who would you be willing to die for? And most of the kids, high school kids, they would be like, I would die for my mom, right? So like near Mother's Day or something like that, I would ask that question. They'd be like, yeah, I'd be willing to die for my mom. And then I'd be like, because I'm a male, right? I'm a guy. I'm like, how many of you would be willing to die for your dad? And you know what most of them say? They're like, why would I die for my dad? He's a grown man, like he can die. It's okay. But for my mom, I would die. And I'm like, that's a little unfair, dude. Like, I'm a guy. Who would you be willing to die for? Someone in your family, someone close to your family. See, but when we look at Jesus Christ, He died for you. He died for me. He died for us. And because He is God the Son, when He died on the cross, He could die for all of us. In the book of Romans, Paul, when he talks about Romans, he says, yes, a good man, he could die for another. Like if you have a best friend, we talk about this like friendship things, right? If you grow up, and as you're growing up, if you have a best friend who is willing to die for you, we would definitely say that you are truly blessed, right? If you have a friend who's willing to die for you, what more can you ask in life, right? If you have 2 friends that will be willing to die for you, how much more blessed are you? But the other question that that comes to me as I get older and older is this. It'd be great for them to die for me. But if you know about it, would they be willing to die for you if you weren't willing to die for them? Right? Like, would you die for someone knowing that they wouldn't die for you? You know what I mean? Like, you're in a life and death situation, and you're looking at each other, and you're like, okay, it's either you or me. And the other guy says, okay, how about you? Right? I was very blessed when a friend of mine, we met a mutual friend, and the friend, he's an EM pastor in this neighborhood, in this area, and then we were talking, and he says, oh, do you know, like, oh, hello, how are you? We gave pleasantries, and then I said, oh, do you know someone at your church? And he says, oh yeah, he told me about you, and he said that so my friend who introduced me to him, he said, oh, he told me that he would be willing to place his life for you, that he would be willing to risk and place his life in your care. And when I heard that, I was like, that's such an honor, that someone would think and say something, just like saying that I'm willing to trust my life with him. And as soon as I heard that, I said, I would be truly willing to trust my life with him also. See, friendships. So here's a question. Do you have friends like that who are willing to die for you, who you are willing to die for them? If we don't have that in our lives, it's possible. We're young. I had a best friend when I was in college and when I was in church, and I felt very, very disappointed, and because he was disloyal to me, so I didn't talk to him for years and years. Because I was like, I would be willing to risk everything for you, but you wouldn't risk for me. So as a human being, I was very highly disappointed. But see, there is one that when we look in life, our life is a life of sin and misery. But there is one who was willing and who already did 2,000 years ago. He is our best friend. Because he died for us. We didn't even know it. 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years ago, we weren't even born. We weren't even a thought in somebody's mind. But yet, God the Father sent him 2,000 years ago in accordance with Scripture of the Old Testament in the prophecies, that when Adam and Eve sinned and died, death came into this world. But God said, I will send the Redeemer, and he will die on the cross, and he will redeem. He will die in your stead. So because Christ died on the cross for us, see, that is where we are worthy. Not because of ourselves, because he was willing to die on the cross for us. That's where our worth comes from. That's where our identity, when we talk about the identity, what is your identity? Your identity in Jesus Christ. If you are a believer, if you have accepted and if you recognize and understood that Jesus Christ died for you on the cross, when you recognize that though worthless sinner that I was, he was willing to do that when I didn't care, when I was far away, when I didn't care about the church or I didn't care about faith or anything else, but that he was willing and he did already die on the cross for us. So then when we recognize and understand that, Paul says, whatever happens in your life and in the world, he says, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. See, the gospel of Jesus Christ is that he was willing to come to this world when we were sinners, when we didn't care about him at all, when we were worthless, and he died for us. And he became our friend when there was no other friend. I know a lot of times, even when I was growing up, I was always like looking for a friend, right? And someone has said, who's your best friend? At this point, I can say my closest and my best friend is my wife, right? It better be. And I think when you look around, for those who are married, he or she needs to be your best friend. And I know, like there was a little Facebook post that went up, my daughter, because July the 4th was our 30th anniversary, 30 years. And so my youngest daughter put up a little Facebook post where I was holding my hands with my wife. And then, there were people who were like, oh, marriage goals and things of that nature. But to be very honest with you, my wife put up, it wasn't always easy. And it still isn't. And that's because we are sinful people. But because we have been redeemed, because Christ died for me, Christ died for my wife, for our children, for you. And if Christ died for you, see, that's where your value comes in. And you know what I said in the beginning about Bryce Harper worth, $330 million, $30 million a year. Kawhi Leonard, 4 years, $142 million. Yeah, sometimes, you envy certain people because they're close to you. That, they have a little more than I do, but these people have like 30 million. I'm like, it's beyond envious. But the other thing that I have, I don't know whether they're good Christians. Last couple of years, like Steph Curry from Golden State, I heard he's a good Christian. Like the other guy that I was looking at was Jeremy Lin, right? We Koreans, Asians, we love Jeremy Lin. We're like, oh, Jeremy Lin. And the funny thing was, like, when the Toronto Raptors won the NBA, I'm looking at television, I'm like, yo, just Jeremy Lin, right? And I asked my son-in-law, I said, hey, did you know that Jeremy Lin was part of the Toronto Raptors? So that's a side detail. But it's like, can we compare our life with millions of dollars? No. See, we are worth more than millions and millions. We're worth billions and billions because the creator of the universe was willing to come into this earth to die for me. And I know that he died for me. And if you're a believer in Jesus Christ and you understand the gospel of Jesus Christ, anything and everything in this world cannot compare. The value and the worth of these things in this world cannot compare to the love that God has given to you and to me. It's amazing grace that God was willing to do that for me. And then the only conclusion that I have for this morning is this. Paul says, right? Paul says, whatever happens, so whatever happens in life and whatever happens in our life circumstances, he says, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. So the goal that I have and the challenge that I have for you and me is that we need to live a life in a manner. And that manner of being worthy is that you and I know we were not worthy. We were not worthy, and yet he had mercy on us, and he had grace on us. So for the rest of my life, I will live in thankfulness and in obedience. Let's pray.